Welcome back to Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and of course, we always talk about the physical part of the game, along with the coaching on and off the field. But what about the coaching that goes beyond the football field and beyond your coaches on the football field? Sometimes you need someone to get things right when they feel like they're going wrong. With players taking mental breaks this season, I figured it would be a good thing to bring on a life coach. Joining the show is Meika Mashack, a certified life coach that focuses on sports, relationships, and performance. How you doing tonight?
I'm well. Thank you for asking and thanks for having me.
Well, again, thanks for coming on. Now, before we get into the questions, how did you kind of get into being a life coach in a specialty?
Well, I did some formal training at Berkeley. I graduated from UC Berkeley, and then I went on to get my master's degree and my MSW so I can work at the macro and micro levels. And I've done a bunch of corporate training and things of that nature. But what has always been consistent in my life is my connection to sports. So I grew up as a track girl in Los Angeles and from being very young on up. But I found around maybe the high school years, they recruited a lot of guys out of track into football and sometimes basketball. And so I grew up knowing a bunch of top athletes. I was a D1 athlete. I knew a bunch. My husband ended up being one. Now we have kids who are D1 athletes. But that was always very connected to my life. And even as I was doing a lot of other clinical work, I found myself constantly doing counseling and coaching for my friends who were athletes. And it just kind of went on from there. Once I realized I had a different perspective because it was so close to my life, along with my formal training, I knew like this is something I need to continue to do. So it kind of chose me.
Got you. Now, what has been the different levels of athletes that you've had to kind of been able to deal with in your career as a life coach?
Yes, I've worked with high schoolers, I've worked with collegiates, collegiate athletes, professional athletes, and even ironically, as I'm getting older, retired athletes, people who are transitioning out of being in the limelight to how do they transition into something else. So, for instance, my husband, he's a Hall of Famer at his college, played Division I basketball, we played some professional basketball in Europe, a little bit here in the States, but he transitioned into becoming an LA firefighter. There's several athletes that go into different fields, but a lot of times it's difficult to transition out of that, out of sports. So that's also a population that I work with. So all across the board. And then now being a mom of athletes, it's like a whole circle, a new generation of high school collegiates and professional athletes now.
Got you. Of course, now that we've got a little bit of background and things on you, I want to discuss Calvin Ridley. Now, the Atlanta Falcons wide receiver decided to step away from the game for mental health, dealing with mental health of your patients. What would be the first thing you would suggest to try to help Ridley kind of find his way back to a good mental space?
Well, I'm always cautious when it comes to talking about athletes. So for Calvin, I don't know Calvin personally. So they've been very vague about why he stepped away. So I'm always cautious when I talk about things that I've heard if I haven't heard from the client directly. But I will say this: there's such a stigma around mental health. I'm just very glad that he was secure enough to say that's what he needed. Um, I don't, it could be related to performance. Sometimes it's even related to wanting to change their situation and not knowing how to do that and being really affected in that environment. But I'm very glad that he is open to stating that he needs that time and that the communities are now becoming more open to listening and understanding that. You know, my age group, it wasn't counseling wasn't something, mental health issues weren't something that was accepted. And then you go into being a male, and then you go into an African American male, and then in a very alpha sport. That is just, so many guys don't reach out in that way or say, I need time or I need help. So I'm very happy that at least that conversation is being started.
Got you. Now, aside from Ridley, and I want to wish him well on his journey back and whatever he's going through. We've had, of course, Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles. He took a mental break to kind of
Mm-hmm.
get himself together
Mm-hmm.
and to focus and prioritize his mental health. Um, what do you feel is the role of a life coach in general?
Well, it's really about how can I help this person be their best self. It's wellness. As you know, all of these things in life, your how you feel, what you're going through, your relationships. When it comes to sports, they all affect your performance. We're not as compartmentalized as we used to be. And one of the primary reasons of that, and there's just not enough research on it, and I'm hoping that universities like Berkeley and some of these other top institutions will really take time to look at the effect of social media on the athlete. It's huge. So there's so much that's connected, and you can go to a psychiatrist, but they're going to prescribe you medication. I'm not a psychiatrist. I didn't go to medical school, but that's what they do. They prescribe you medicine, and you're not going to spend a lot of time with them, maybe 15 minutes. It's not a lot of time. So counselors, life coaches, therapists, there's such a need because there's other layers to what's going on with athletes, and they just don't have that space. It's becoming more understood, but it's just far underfunded, and it's not enough people paying attention to that, and it's directly affecting performance. Now, as people keep walking away in the middle of a season saying, I can't do that, or tweeting, I don't want to be here, or stopping, I think they're going to start to realize, oh, we need to pay attention to these things because it's affecting our bottom line. But right now, I don't think it's understood enough how much it affects performance. Does that make sense?
Definitely. One thing I wanted to ask as well, so is it like more of a balancing act when talking to athletes about where they are mentally, or is it more of getting to the root of the issue?
It's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. For me, if I'm working with an athlete, I don't spend a lot of time going into their childhood traumas or things that might be affecting them. I work more with what's going on currently. However, there are oftentimes things that are connected to the past that affect their patterns of behavior, their cycles of performance, and that is so critical to the current now. So you can't ignore it. But with life coaching, particularly versus like in-depth therapy, I'm more focused on what's going on today, how is it affecting you today, and all of those things around you, your relationships. As a life coach, I can talk to family, your fiance, your baby mama, I can figure out what's the best dynamic to get to the root of what's affecting your performance right now. And that doesn't always happen in a traditional setting. Um, I used to work for a company that we dealt with traumatic brain injuries. So that could be a sports injury, an accident, what have you. And it wasn't a stroke. Our mean age was around 35, 40. So I work with some 16-year-olds up to some 60-year-olds, so a variety. But what was the difference in that company is we did therapies. I was working with the mental health side. The therapies, the physical therapy, occupational, was all done in a natural setting. It wasn't in a clinical office. And we helped, it could be a police officer, get back to the force. And it changed my view of clinical work. Like I wanted to get into what were you doing? Were you a surgeon before? So my counseling and coaching needs to be very similar to what you were doing as a profession. And that's how I handle life coaching. And that's really is what's going to make the biggest impact is being in those environments and helping. So you're kind of looking at all views in order to help this person. That's what life coaching is supposed to be. That's how I do life coaching.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I want to talk about some or events that happen on the field. Like, for example, Derrick Henry,
Oh,
never really been injured his entire career with the Titans, gets injured, hurts his foot. Now he has to have foot surgery. He's out for a while. That's a traumatic event, a traumatic moment on the field. How do you address a client that may have had that dramatic moment and they've experienced it and it's very fresh and new to them and they've never kind of been through that? How do you address those type of
oh
clients?
man, that's so tough. That just hurt my heart. I love watching him play. So that was just devastating, and I'm sure devastating for him. But one of the tenets of doing this type of work, I call it, is starting where the client is. So everyone handles things differently. So I have to see where they are at that time. Some people have a harder time right after injury. Some people have a harder time when they're getting close to coming back. It just depends on where that person is. But regardless, this is a life altering situation. It also depends on what type of athlete they are. Like, is this a major starter? Is like he was carrying the team. So that's different than someone who might not have a bigger role. It still affects them, but it's different. So for him, it's going to take some time. I would have to, see where he is in his process of what kind of support systems he has, what's his plan, what's his mindset of recovery. Some people, and we know this from research, if you have a positive mindset that says, oh, I'm going to get back. AP was very big. Adrian Peterson was really big on like, oh no, you're tripping. Like I'm coming back. I'm coming back. And not only am I coming back, I'm going to be better than I was. Everyone doesn't have that mindset. So you have to find out where they are and kind of work around that. But regardless, it's traumatic. I remember my son, he was a baller in high school. And right when he was getting ready to pop out, he was a freshman getting ready to play varsity for football. And he broke his femur. And he was in a wheelchair. And he couldn't even go to school. And I can see the depression kind of coming onto him. And so, being a clinician, I'm getting help. I know I can't be mom and clinician, but it depends on how much your whole life is built around that sport. Some people are good at putting other things in place around them, and some people, that's it. So it depends on the person, but absolutely, no matter what, a traumatic injury on the field is going to affect you, and it's a road to health. But it's really incumbent upon that organization and that person to get the kind of help that they need at the right times, and it's not the same for everyone.
Got you. Yeah, definitely. You know, I would say this. Back when I played, of course, I did play college football. Played back 2000 to 2004.
All right.
There wasn't any type of like that or mental health professional around the team. In sports today, for both professional and collegiate, do you think more life coaches and mental health professionals need to be employed by franchises and collegiate programs?
Absolutely. Definitely. You know, things were a bit different. Like I said, with social media, how you perform or the lack thereof, I mean, you are reminded all day, every day, somebody's commenting, somebody's telling you how trash you are. Like that, if these organizations don't realize how critical that is to the performance, even if they don't care about the athlete, to their bottom line, their money, they're going to struggle. And I, you know, we're gaining some traction, but it absolutely needs to be more. Now, my son was a different son was highly recruited more recently. I'm actually out of town in a hotel, visiting him for one of his basketball games. But one of the recruiting tools at some of the high majors was that they had a department, a mental health specialist, a coach, or things of that nature. But even as I was asking those questions, there were more, and I work in cognition too, but it wasn't really about what's going on with him 360. It was pieces directly affected to, like, how fast will you be able to put your reaction time. It wasn't very much to the root of what a lot of these players are going through, especially with social media and the effect of it in their lives. So I think we still have a long way to go. There needs to be a bridge there. I see it in football. I see it in basketball. It's needed, and it's growing, but not at the rate that it needs to.
Gotcha. Now, what, say we move on to a space and time and where we have life coaches and we have mental health professionals on the sidelines and at practices, and they literally are seeing them at least once a week, I should say. I'm just throwing something out there. What effect do you think that will have in terms of changing the landscape of sports in general?
I can tell you this, and I can tell you at all the levels. Professionally, you'll have people who are willing to stay and build and keep the team chemistry and climate together better. I don't know how much you know about college sports, but the transfer portal at the collegiate level is astounding. It's like within the last 2 years, it's ridiculous. There's over 1,000 people in the transfer portal. It's not even enough scholarship places for the people. So right. it would stop this kind of transient behavior of people just leaving because they don't feel connected or they're not getting the resources that they need from a mental health perspective. Same thing at high school. My daughter is in high school, and I mean, people transfer 2 to 3 times. Like, that didn't happen in high school. It happens all the time now. So if we keep ignoring this, we're going to have so much, moving from place to place, hard to get a consistent chemistry, hard to perform and get to different levels. If life coaching and therapy becomes more commonplace in sports, we're going to see a better product. It's hard to have the best product. This is why I'm sure you watched March Madness last year. Some of these older right. teams who stayed together for years, they outperformed some teams with a ton of talent. It makes business sense. And I'm not even an advocate for just like business, but it makes business sense as well to focus on that part. It's a win-win for both parties, but we're just not there yet. And I think we need to keep doing what you're doing now, bringing light to the need of it and letting players know that it's safe and it's a great thing for you to do that. I think Ron Artest, helped with that a bit. But because his behavior was so far left, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I'm not that bad. I don't need that. There's levels to this thing, and there's definitely a need.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, let's see. Just to throw in, would you say players would need to meet with a life coach or a mental health professional, say if they did have one?
How often did you say?
Yes.
Regularly, but not specifically. I think the bigger piece would be building a relationship with them where they know it's time for me to check in. You have some general times, but it won't always have to be once a week or once a month. There's different times in your life when you need more help, where you need more support. And then there's times that you're okay. The goal would be for them to get the knowledge and the understanding to be able to say, oh, I need some check-in right now. I need to this is what's going on, or I'm transitioning into something else. So you're still empowering them to understand, I need to look out for this part, just like I look out for my body. It's the same thing. And okay, I'm not feeling right here. Let me go get this checked out. Same thing. That's the premise of how often. So in crisis, it might be more regular. But outside of that, it's more about building a relationship to know, hey, that person has my back. I know I can go there and get the help that I need.
Got you. Now, of course, with the negative stigmatism around it, of course, plenty of people will still say that, oh, he's okay, he needs to do this, to rub some dirt on it, things like that. How do we kind of get rid of the negative stigmatism that surrounds it?
That's the thing. That's the thing. We have to encourage athletes to be honest about where they are and what they're struggling with, and not demonize them for it. And I think we're getting a little better there. Definitely more so in hoop than in football, but we have to encourage that. And it's not a soft thing to take care of yourself. We see it with in tennis with Naomi. We see it with Rui. Like it's all over the place right now. But I think athletes actually coming out. DeMar DeRozan, California, he came out with something saying that he had struggled with depression, and Kevin Love said some things. Like, the more athletes say that, it's just like, I hate to say it this way, but even with, like with racism, the more allies that say, oh yeah, there is this going on, the more people's eyes are going to be open. So with athletes, the more people who are coming out and saying, like, yeah, this worked for me, or I struggle with this, the more it gives the freedom to other athletes. I don't want to put it all on them, on the clients. So we as organizations, people like you and I, getting the word out is still going to help tremendously. And then putting some pressure on these teams to do that. Like, athletes need to do that. Athletes' families need to do that. The higher level athletes need to do that. Our universities need to continue to do that. Because the more we talk about it and understand it, the better we'll be. Now, I do feel like we can't just have this umbrella of mental health and everyone freezes. Like when Ben Simmons came out and said it, no one really knew what to do. It's like everything paused. There needs to be some treatment plans in place where, okay, you're experiencing some of this, you have some mental health challenges. What are we going to do about it? What does that look like? What is the time frame? Like, if you get hurt, you don't just say, I broke my, I tore my ACL, but I'm just going to sit it out for the next. No, you're going to get treatment. There's going to be a plan. There's going to be some measurables, some checks and balances. The same thing needs to happen with mental health as well. It's not that clean, but it needs to happen. So the more we kind of put that information out, and the organizations know we're not the enemy as providers, I think that bridge will continue to that gap will continue to lessen over time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, definitely was a very good conversation on mental health, a conversation that needed to be had, conversation that people need to hear, and just a ever-growing part of society and just sports and things like that. Because one time, we need to get to a point where we prioritize mental health like we do our physical health, because you can't be healthy mentally and then not healthy physically. You can't, just like the opposite way, you can't be healthy physically and not healthy mentally.
Absolutely.
So, that's what you have to start worrying about, taking care of the entire body, mind, body, spirit, everything.
Yep. You call it like biopsychosocial, your biology, your psychology, your social, all of that needs to come together for you to be whole.
Right. Well, I hope they got that at your son's university. But but I do want to thank you for coming on, and let everyone know where they can find you, and what else you have going on.
Yeah, you can find me on any of the platforms on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Meika Mashack. Just Meika, Meika, Mashack, Mashack. I do a lot kind of behind the scenes, so there's not a lot of things that are visible because my clients' personal business is very important to me. So, but you can reach me at any of those. You'll see me tweeting and talking about sports or my kids in sports or what have you. But absolutely, I'm looking forward to connecting with others.
Well, I look forward to seeing your son on the basketball court because I did some research on saw a few clips. I was like, okay,
Yeah, he's just a freshman.
can you tell me this? But
Yeah, he's good, and it's the same thing. I'm telling him the same thing. He didn't grow up like a lot. Once you get to high major, some of these kids have been training since 4. It's a different beast in today's time when it comes to sports. Kids are way more skilled. They have way more pressure. It's a lot of adjusting, and I've been able to see several, and even with my oldest, several people become professional athletes from a parental standpoint, seeing them, and it's a lot. So you have to have grounded people around you or you're not going to make it. Like we didn't grow up with this beast of social media just every day seeing all the negativity, and the positivity comes, but it can go really quickly. So I'm just telling him, just follow the process, take your time, enjoy it, enjoy this. This is such a business now, $1 trillion business. A lot of these kids don't get to enjoy it. So it's like enjoy it and have some fun along the way. Everything else will come.
that's true. That's true. Well, want to thank you for coming on again. This has
Welcome,
been
Mike.
Touring the AFC South. We've been talking mental health with Meika Mashack. I'm your host, Mike Patton. We're out.
Take care.